And when it comes to form assessment, one of the underlying psychological concepts that comes about is the concept of reciprocity. And this concept talks about how people like to return favors.
Looking like a baddie, I show up and make them stop. Wanna know my name so badly, cause I run this whole block. Flip my hair, move my head, show the world I'm royalty. When I walk by, they be taking bows, cause they know I'm the queen, yeah.
Hi there. Thank you for showing the interest in the Experiment Nation conference and in the art and science of optimizing newsletter forms. I'm Anna, a CRO manager at Better Collective, and this is my experience with the forms. I want to start by explaining the goal of form optimization because I don't think that forms as elements are being evangelized enough. And I think that unfortunately, the efforts of form optimizations always or most often goes unnoticed, which is a shame. So let's start with the most important benefit, in my opinion, which is having better insights. And if we were to break this down, we would have to mention the way that Google Analytics 4 collects data nowadays. So what you see in the reports, in GA4 reports, is not the exact data, and you don't often see the full picture of the numbers that happen in reality on your website. What you do see is the so-called modeled data. This means that every time a visitor doesn't accept cookies on your website, you won't see their data in the reports, but what you will see is the prediction of the behavior of the visitors that didn't accept the cookies. And this is done by machine learning process, and Google calls this behavioral modeling. Now, of course, we are mentioning cookie policy because of privacy concerns on the internet and GDPR laws. Now, of course, this only pertains to Europe. So, speaking of modeled data and better insights with the forms, where the benefit lies is in user IDs. Um, So if you were to get an increased number of signups to your email newsletter, and people would, of course, give up their email addresses, um, you would be able to assign a user ID to every email address. And in that way, you would be able to see the actual behavior on the website. So you wouldn't be looking modeled data in your GA4 reports, but you would see the exact situation and the exact numbers on the website. This would be helpful for you to see the behavior of the visitors. And for example, you would be able to answer a question like, how many sessions does it take before a visitor converts? And of course, you would be able to see the exact number of new and returning visitors. Right now, what you see in GA4 is should be taken with a pinch of salt, because every time your existing visitors on the website delete their cookies and come back to your website after the deletion, they will automatically be assigned as new visitors, even though they are an existing user. So this report now has to be taken with a pinch of salt, but with user IDs, this wouldn't have to be the case. Then the next benefit, of course, is uh, brand building, because with optimized forms, you're forming a relationship, communicating with your fan base in a more private way, and they enjoy the curated content that they receive, um, because this is kind of separating them from the rest of the visitors on your website. Last but not least is the fact that you would be able to create high value customers in this way with talking to them in a private communication manner. And of course, high value customers are very important for the business because they have the highest impact on revenue, and they are also this group, the segment of the audience, your loyal visitors, are most likely to recommend your business by word of mouth. So I want to tell you how I'm going to structure the presentation here, and I'm mostly going to be talking about ways to find potential with the help of data, with the help of heuristic analysis. And I will not be focusing that much on A/B testing, but A/B tests uh, do deserve a special mention. Of course, if you do have enough traffic, you certainly want to A/B test your ideas to see your if your hypotheses resonate with the majority of your users. So A/B testing is very important, but for the sake of presentation, we will be focusing on data and heuristics. Now, data really helps you stay on the path of objectivity, and it helps you move away from personal opinions. On the other hand, we use heuristics, which is a fancy way of saying that you assess your website, or in this case, forms, by using and relying on your professional opinion and on your experience. Now, in heuristics, we also rely on user experience principles. We're going to be talking about this a lot. And we rely on CRO principles, which can overlap, but we will also discuss those in greater detail. When it comes to heuristics, you also want to be looking at heat map data and user recordings. And these two tools help you see the actual behavior of your visitors on the website, and they help you create a fuller picture of what goes on the forums or on the pages. So let's dig in.
This is Romo Santiago from Experiment Nation. Every week we share interviews with and conference sessions by our favorite conversion rate optimizers from around the world. So if you like this video, smash that like button and consider subscribing. It helps us a bunch. Now back to the episode.
For this data part, I really want you to put your detective hat on and be a data detective. And let's talk about what are the most important metrics when it comes to tracking. Um, of course, naturally, you want to track the full submission of your form. What this means is that you want to see the whole path that your visitors took. Um, Besides only tracking the clicks on CTA button, which is what happened in my experience, and then in hindsight, I realized that this is not enough. Of course, you want to track the whole journey and every separate field in your form. What you see now is a very simplified form, but no matter of the length, you want to track every field because this will help you analyze issues, and we'll get there as well. So make sure to track full submissions. Now, what can also signify a full submission is a thank you page. This most often your visitors will receive a thank you page after they've gone through the whole form. And most often, this is a separate URL that you can track in your analytics tool. But sometimes you will have only a thank you element on the page. And in this case, what you want to do is create a custom event, which will track this element and it will signify a full submission. Some marketers also use the verification email due to various reasons. For example, separating bot traffic from the regular traffic and regular subscriptions. So if you're using email verification, your metric can be verification email, because this signifies that people went through the whole journey. So you want to track these metrics in order to see how your form behaves. Of course, another important thing to track is the number of unsubscribers. It might just so happen that your email automation tool, of course, gives this number out of the box. And in my experience, even if people are not really satisfied with the content, they tend not to unsubscribe. They will more often just not open the emails. So you can take a look uh, at the relationship between the unsubscribers and the rate of open emails to see the behavior and drop offs and try to come up with conclusions. Of course, you want to look at email traffic coming from your newsletter content. And this is the ultimate goal. You want increased engagement on the website coming from emails if your content is quality. And like I said, you also want to track separate form fields. And I'm going to explain in the next section why this is also important. Now, this is an example from a Swedish site, and I translated this so that you can understand what goes on the form. And when I mentioned tracking separate fields, uh, I wanted to show that this is important because engagement time in these fields can really tell you where the people had troubles filling in the fields and where they dropped off. So you want to look at the engagement time between every field and try to figure out where the bottlenecks happened. Of course, you would go through the form and try to understand what creates a problem. We will also cover this part later. Another way to analyze your data is by looking at user segments. One of the most common segmentations is dividing the traffic by device. In my experience, most of the visitors come from mobile device, which is where we direct optimization efforts. Another thing to analyze, another metric to look at is time of day. It might just happen that the majority of your visitors sign up at specific time of day, and you want to connect this time of day with your efforts on the website. Was it because of a blog post? Was it something specific? You can also use this information to serve the form at a specific time. And there are different hypotheses that you can come up with this analyzed piece of data. And we did talk about what to track. We talked about what to analyze and which metrics to use in order to analyze and identify drop-offs. But what you can also use data for is to predict behavior. For example, you might have seen that some of your visitors come back to a blog post, let's say, a couple of times in a session, which might signify that they are looking for more similar content and that they are eating this content up. So this could be a good indicator that, um, like I said, they are interested. So the hypothesis there could be that serving them with a newsletter form will make them or motivate the visitors to sign up for the newsletter. Of course, I want to give an example here, which might be regarded as intrusive, and I'm talking about pop-up forms. Of course, you want to test them out to see if the visitors resonate with them, but if you gauge the interest of your visitors into your content, and you serve them with a pop-up at the right time with the right message, this might just influence the sign-ups, the number of subscribers, and at the end of the day, revenue. Now we're moving on to the more heuristic part of form assessment. We were talking about data so far and how you can use the numbers to find drop-offs and bottlenecks. Now let's start discussing the user experience and how you can actually um, go through the forms yourself and find bottlenecks there as well. Of course, it would be good if you had a pool of people willing to go through your forms as pretend visitors and subscribers and let you know what is wrong with the form or what works well. But you can also go through the form yourself just to experience it. And of course, you would want to uh, take a look at three different aspects of the form assessment, which would be position, functionality, and layout. You want to see if your form is visible enough, if the users uh, have the chance to actually notice it. And then functionality, you want to go through the form, which we will see in the example, and ask yourself questions like, is it behaving properly? Am I expecting this to happen? What happens if I make an error, and so on. Of course, the layout is also very important, but we will see what makes a good layout of the form. Now let's take a look at this Danish media site and their form. Um, Now, as you can see, I deliberately wrote down a wrong email address. I wanted to check what will happen if I make a mistake. And it took me a long time to translate this message, but what I finally got was a thank you note. And this means that I allegedly signed up, and in reality, there was no subscription. The subscription was not registered in the email automation tool, which means that if this happened in reality, the subscriber wouldn't be receiving the content, but he or she would think that they did sign up. So this means that um, I would be losing out on a customer. And let's move on with our heuristic analysis and talk about persuasion techniques. And when it comes to form assessment, one of the underlying psychological concepts that comes about is the concept of reciprocity. And this concept talks about how people like to return favors. And in case of forms, if you give out your visitor a benefit or talk to them from their own perspective, and if they perceive your message as a benefit, they will be more than willing to give up their email address in exchange for quality content. Of course, the concept of reciprocity ties in with the value proposition. So value proposition is the message that you give out to your visitors, and it has to be written from their perspective, so you don't just get to brag about how well your website is performing, or how good your content is. You really need to show it to them so they can perceive it. This is the example that I wanted to show you. What they did is offered me a piece of information. Thursday is the best day to send emails with the highest open and click-through rates. Send your next campaign with MooSend on Thursday. And there's a email field here, and the CTA button. This is an example from MooSend. They're an email automation website, or company, and this is from their website. And I really responded to this of because of the way they use their knowledge about user personas. They know that the visitor will probably be a marketer, so they offered me a piece of info that really resonates with my line of work. And another persuasion technique that you can use is, of course, social proof. And this one talks about how people tend to follow groups. And if you can take a look here, we have an example from a Swedish media website. And on the left, we have a before version where the value proposition was just log in. And in the after version, in the tested version, we expanded this value proposition to say, join our family of more than 20,000 members. And this resulted in a 123% of increased subscribers, which was amazing. So that was proof that people like to belong to an exclusive group. And the larger the number, the more they will respond. Of course, this has to be tested. If you have enough visitors, enough traffic on your website to run a successful A/B test. Let's take a look at some CRO and UX principles. One of those is removing distractions. Now, in this example here, we have the same Danish media website, and this is their form. What you can see on the form are some social icons right there. And these are, of course, very useful elements for the visitors. However, even good items can present distractions in a situation where they are not needed, just like here. When the visitors are supposed to sign up, signing up should be the only action that they have to perform. And you don't want to offer them other options and scatter their attention away from the form. So be mindful of that as well. And then another strategy that you can use is making it convenient to sign up. This CRO and UX principle relies to another psychological concept of cognitive fluency, which proposes that people tend to do those things that are easy, that they perceive as easy to do. So the example here is the same Danish website, and the form used to have two checkboxes with different text, and this was compliance text. So what we wanted to do was make the journey a bit shorter, and one of the ideas was to keep only one checkbox here and compile all the text, all the compliance text in one checkbox. Another smart way to do this, if you of course have to use legal text like we did have to use it here, is to just use microcopy. You might want to test this out, but microcopy would just be text under the CTA button saying, by clicking on the sign up button, I hereby accept terms and conditions. Of course, this text has to be GDPR compliant if you're dealing with a European website, but this is the gist of it. Another way to make it convenient to sign up for your visitors is to remove reCAPTCHA. Now, reCAPTCHA is really useful for marketers to sniff out bots. However, having to click on random images or type random letters is not a very user-friendly practice. So if you have enough traffic, you could A/B test whether people respond to not having reCAPTCHA on the form by signing up more. There are some studies that say that removing reCAPTCHA increases conversion rates on the forms by 30%. Another CRO principle that we heavily rely on is actually concerned with lowering anxiety. Now, in this form on a Swedish website that we've seen before, you can see an error message, and this is one way that you can lower anxiety on the forms. Uh, Error messages are not supposed to be threatening, and here it's written in red and it looks very scolding. And also, this message is not written under a field where the error happens or right next to the field where it happens. It is written above the fields, and it causes even more cognitive load for the visitor or subscriber to notice it. So what you can do with error messages is just keep them non-threatening, not really threatening, and uh, it doesn't really even have to be an error message. It can just be a message that cheers for the user on their journey to sign up to your form, regardless of the type of the form. It can be a newsletter form or any other form on your website. But you can use this principle of letting the users know that they finished a field, they wrote in the field successfully. So you can offer them messages of cheering on their way of signing up. Another time where when people feel anxiety is when they predict there is going to be spam, and this especially happens with newsletters in general. And I don't want to say fear of spam, but everybody feels kind of anxiety about spam. But a good way to lower anxiety is to actually mention how many times you're going to offer the newsletters. And in this specific example on Baymard Institute website, on their newsletter sign up form, they explicitly say that they will deliver newsletters twice a month. And another thing that they mention in microcopy, which is great, is that topics include user experience, web design, and e-commerce, so the visitors know what to expect. And this also lowers anxiety in a way. Another thing here that they mention is that articles are always ad-free, which is an amazing thing to know up front. And the ultimate way to lower anxiety is by saying that you're always one click away from unsubscribing. So that's a very good practice on their newsletter form. If your forms have fields where visitors have to input numbers, what you want to do is show them a numerical keyboard instead of an alphabetical keyboard, because if they are on mobile, it's much easier for them to start typing on a numerical keyboard than switching from the alphabetical one themselves. And I've seen many times that on numerical fields, the form actually offers a drop down menu, so people have to scroll down and select the number. This isn't a really good practice, so it's much better to just give them the numerical keyboard so that they can select the numbers. Now, thank you for listening and for tuning in. And if you want to start optimizing the forms right away, make sure to go through the steps yourself and pay attention to functionality because it trumps design. Um, do remove distractions and frustrations for your visitors by going through the form and realizing where the bottlenecks are. Make sure to optimize the whole journey and not stop at the forms. keep it going even in the emails. And if you have enough traffic, do A/B test everything and see if your ideas resonate with your visitors.
This is Romo Santiago from Experiment Nation. Every week we share interviews with and conference sessions by our favorite conversion rate optimizers from around the world. So if you like this video, smash that like button and consider subscribing.